The world order that gave you cheap flights, cheap food, and the illusion of lasting peace is collapsing right now. And what replaces it will look nothing like what came before. This video explains why that collapse was inevitable and what it means for everyone watching. Think about the last time the world actually felt stable. Wars are breaking out in the Middle East. Inflation is destroying savings that took decades to build. And young people, genuinely intelligent, hardworking young people, are giving up. Entirely lying flat, quiet, quitting, betting everything on crypto just to have some chance at a future. And here's the thing most people miss. None of this is random. None of this is bad luck. What you are watching is a world order dying in real time. And the system that built your entire way of life is the one coming apart at the seams. If you're learning something here, please hit subscribe. You'll get notified every time I post, and you'll be part of something that genuinely matters to me. Let's get into the video. To understand where things are heading, you first need to understand what we are leaving behind. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, an American State Department official named Francis Fukuyama wrote one of the most influential essays of the 20th century, and he called it The End of History. His argument was that humanity had tried every major system, monarchy, fascism, communism, and every single one had failed. What survived was liberal consumer democracy, the freedom to buy what you want, vote for whoever you want, and believe whatever you choose. Fukuyama called this the apex of human civilization, the final answer to thousands of years of political experimentation. And at a time, a lot of serious people agree with him. What followed from that moment is what historians call the Unipolar moment. One superpower sitting at the center of a single global system with America holding the controls. And that unipolar world rested on three pillars, all three of which are now cracking at the same time, which is exactly why everything around you feels so unstable. The first pillar was Pax Americana, Latin for American peace. And for the first time in recorded history, one nation held enough power to maintain order across the entire globe. America did this three ways. Through aerial military supremacy backed by special forces and intelligence operations that reached into every government on Earth. Through mass surveillance dressed up as the internet, and through multilateral institutions like the United Nations and the World Bank that gave the American empire a democratic friendly face. So nobody noticed who was actually running things. And in the beginning, it worked. East Asia stopped fighting itself and started trading. Hundreds of millions of people escaped poverty. Pax Americana, whatever its flaws, delivered a level of peace and prosperity the world had genuinely never seen. The second pillar was the supremacy of science, which gradually replaced religion as the organizing belief system of the modern world. Scientists became a kind of transnational priesthood, loyal not to any one nation, but to an international brotherhood of journals and institutions. And those institutions answered ultimately to the American empire. During COVID, anyone who raised methodological questions about vaccine development timelines was treated not as a curious person asking reasonable questions, but as a dangerous heretic who deserved public humiliation. That is not science. That is religion wearing a lab coat. The third pillar was the US dollar, and the magic of it still deserves a moment of genuine appreciation. A piece of paper backed by nothing but collective belief that every person on earth agreed have value, Not just value, but the highest possible value. People organize entire lives around accumulating as much of it as possible, even past the point where more of it changes anything about how you actually live. The gap between $100, a million, and $1 billion is functionally zero in terms of what you can do with it. And yet the pursuit never stops. That is how total the illusion became. Every empire in history follows the same arc. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The first generation builds something through sacrifice and discipline. The second generation manages what was built. The third generation inherits it, assumes it will last forever, and destroys it through arrogance. And that is exactly where America finds itself now. Pax Americana started ignoring the rules it created, which meant the whole system lost its legitimacy almost overnight. America bombed Libya and Syria without UN approval, without international consensus. And most recently, moved against Iran without asking the world's opinion or even pretending to care what the answer would be. When the empire that wrote the rules starts breaking them publicly, nobody believes in the rules anymore. And that belief was the only thing holding the system together. Science became orthodoxy rather than discovery. And the results are visible everywhere if you were willing to look honestly. The last genuinely revolutionary scientific breakthrough, not a new app, not a faster chip, but a discovery that changed how humanity lives, came decades ago. Silicon Valley, and this deserves to be said plainly, builds food delivery apps. The institution that was supposed to drive human progress forward became more interested in protecting its own consensus than in questioning it. And that is what happens to every institution, religious or scientific, that starts prioritizing its own survival over its original purpose. The dollar became a machine for manufacturing inequality, and the young generation felt it first. The world we grew up in, the one that gave us cheap flights, abundant food, and the comforting illusion of lasting peace, is collapsing before our eyes. What comes next will look nothing like what we have known. This isn't random. It isn't bad luck. What we are witnessing is the unraveling of an entire global order, a system that built the way we live, and now it is coming apart at the seams. If you want to understand where the world is heading, the first step is to understand what we are leaving behind. For decades, humanity lived under what historians call the unipolar moment, a period after the Cold War in which one superpower, America, dominated a single global system. This dominance rested on three interlocking pillars: Pax Americana, the supremacy of science, and the US dollar. Pax Americana delivered a level of global order and prosperity unprecedented in human history. The United States maintained dominance through military supremacy, intelligence operations, multilateral institutions like the United Nations and the World Bank, and mass surveillance disguised as technological convenience. In the beginning, it worked. East Asia started trading rather than fighting. Hundreds of millions of people escaped poverty. Civilization reached new heights of interconnected prosperity. Science, the second pillar, gradually replaced religion as the organizing belief system of modern life. Scientists became a transnational priesthood, loyal not to nations, but to the institutions and journals that span the globe. institutions ultimately intertwined with American influence. But in recent years, science has too often become orthodoxy rather than discovery, consensus protection rather than exploration. Revolutionary breakthroughs, ones that genuinely redefine human life, are increasingly rare, and innovation has shifted toward convenience and consumer technology rather than fundamental advancement. The third pillar, the US dollar, is an almost magical construct. A piece of paper backed by nothing but collective belief became the center of global value, shaping how people live, work, and organize their lives. The pursuit of wealth, often far beyond the point of practical utility, became an end in itself. Combined with the other pillars, this created an illusion of stability, prosperity, and fairness that was never truly sustainable. And now all three pillars are cracking simultaneously. Money printing has transferred wealth invisibly, from the young to the old, from the poor to the rich. Hardworking young people today, no matter how industrious, find themselves unable to afford homes their parents owned, forced to respond rationally to a rigged system. Some quietly quit, some gamble on cryptocurrency or sports, not because of laziness, but because a rigged game leaves few other options. The collapse is not abstract. It manifests first in the most essential systems: energy, food, water, and infrastructure. Civilization as we know it is built entirely on cheap, reliable oil. Everything from the phones in our hands to the clothes we wear, the medicine in our cabinets, and the food we eat depends on it. Disrupt that flow, whether through conflict, sanctions, or infrastructure failure, and all systems built atop it begin to fail simultaneously. Food production, for example, relies on fertilizers derived from oil and global trade networks. Interrupt those networks, and famine becomes inevitable. Water scarcity, already more severe than food insecurity in many regions, compounds the problem. Countries facing both converge into zones of collapse, producing mass migration. Hundreds of millions of people fleeing instability will collide with aging, economically fragile nations that are politically unprepared to absorb newcomers, creating tensions that could reshape societies. Even the internet, the backbone of modern civilization, is physically fragile. Undersea cables carry nearly all global digital communication, many of which pass through politically volatile regions. A single deliberate disruption could knock out connectivity for 20-30% of the global population. That's not just Netflix or social media, it's banking, finance, supply chains, commerce, and government operations simultaneously grinding to a halt. This is why awareness matters. Understanding the fragility of these systems is not about fear. It is about clarity and survival. The unipolar world optimized for efficiency, profit, and convenience is ending. The new paradigm demands resilience. Can nations feed themselves without imports? Can communities function without external aid? Can individuals provide value independent of a fragile global supply chain? These are not philosophical questions. They are practical, survival questions for governments, communities, and individuals alike. History shows that when material prosperity collapses, societies turn to deeper sources of cohesion, religion, community, or national identity. Societies that make this transition successfully will survive, even thrive, in an unstable world. The generational transition is particularly acute. Older generations hold immense wealth, political power, and access to resources, while younger generations possess the energy, time horizons, and ingenuity needed to solve the complex challenges of AI governance, resource allocation, and geopolitical realignment. The tension between these generations is unprecedented and may define outcomes for entire nations, with countries like Japan facing the most urgent demographic pressures. Some may hope for a return to normalcy, a peace deal, stable oil prices, or a resumption of the world as it was, but that hope is not realistic. The unipolar moment is over. The 30-year period of cheap energy, open borders, and global peace has ended. What comes next is uncertain, but it is not predetermined. Individual choices, community cohesion, and national policies over the next 5 to 10 years will shape the world for generations to come. Now, more than ever, clarity is a rare and vital resource. Learn skills that matter when systems fail. Build communities capable of functioning independently. Question long-held assumptions about the world, because most of what you believed was true only in the historical window that has just closed. Those who see this transition clearly, who act while others hesitate, will not just survive, they will shape what comes next. The world is changing. The stakes have never been higher. The choice is yours: to wait passively for a return to comfort, or to prepare, adapt, and take part in the creation of a new order. Awareness, action, and resilience will define who thrives in this next era.